I'm on a mission to help Europeans break free from US tech and replace it with European privacy-first alternatives. But in order to do that, you of course first have to know what tech to actually replace it with. So I'm going to help you with that. And today we're going to look at web browsers to see if and how we can replace Google Chrome. So let's dive into it. Now the first browser I want to have a look at is one that's often mentioned when we talk about European web browsers, and that's Vivaldi. Now Vivaldi has a couple of strong points and a couple of things you should be aware of. First of all, you need to know that every browser that we're going to talk about is based on an engine. And an engine is basically the underlying infrastructure. And it takes a lot of work for companies or non-profits to maintain this infrastructure. Now, the dominating engine within the web browser landscape is Chromium. And as the name already kind of suggests, Chromium is maintained by Google. Chromium is an open source product, which means that a lot of web browsers can build their own browser on top of it. But the problem with that is that Google is the only one that can actually maintain the underlying infrastructure or the architecture. And that means that browsers that are built on top of Chromium are still relying on Google. And that's going to happen with a lot of the browsers on the list because it's just very expensive to build this infrastructure. Now, a cool thing about Vivaldi is that it's actually European owned. It's owned by Vivaldi Technologies, and it's based in Oslo, in Norway. What I do like about this browser is that it looks a whole lot different than what you would normally see with a browser. So this is basically the homepage. What you'll see immediately is that this is your search and your search bar, which you're going to be used to most of the time. But on the left, it has a whole bunch of things. So let's have a look at that. So first of all, there's the bookmarks. So normally they would be underneath here, but right now they're on the left side. And it's they already added a bunch of things that I didn't add this. This is something that they personally added. It comes pre-installed. So yeah, they have a bunch of bookmarks. I like the fact that they're categorized. This is a very organized browser, I would say. The other one is your downloads. You got your search history, which right now for me is just a Dutch news site. And then there's also the possibility to have notes here, which is interesting for a web browser. So you can just type a note, perfect. And then it will kind of like store it for later use. Which is of course very handy, very useful if you're using browsers for studying or working or whatever. I would also it has a built-in translate function, which is very useful because most of the time, of course, you have to go to Google Translate or one of the European options. So this is very handy. And then we got windows and tabs. Again, that's what I mean with very organized. It has all your closed tabs here. It has your start page, some sync tabs. So yeah, pretty easy overview in general. And then there's also a reading list. You can only use that when, for example, you go to, let's say, a Dutch news website. And then, you got the URL here, and then you can add it to your reading list. So later, when you go back to your homepage again, and there's a reading list. So it's basically just your most visited websites. It's a nice little feature. What's interesting as well is that it comes installed with the social Mastodon for Vivaldi. So right now, here you got some Vivaldi social posts, which I do like that initiative in the sense of supporting European social networks is a good thing, and this is one way to get it out there. Then we've got Vivaldi Help Center, which is funny, but also very easily accessible. And then Wikipedia. I believe this is Wikipedia. Yes, it is Wikipedia. And then you can add anything you want over here. Now, what's also funny, let me put this on the side for a second. So yeah, here it also shows your most visited websites. But again, it's categorized by category. So this is home, this is shopping, and this is traveling. So shopping, it has Dutch Amazon, because I'm Dutch, Temu, Shein, and travel, hotels.com, trip.com, TripAdvisor, anything like that. I do like how very organized it is. Now, so that's quite user-friendly, and also because if you go to any web pages or something, because it's based on Chromium, you can be sure that everything is working. For example, like with CAPTCHAs and all that kind of stuff, like login. On other engines, it sometimes doesn't work, but so that's a pro of having the Chromium-based version. Now, what's interesting here is there's also, it comes installed with a VPN, Proton VPN. Now, I love Proton's products. Right now, as you can see, you can sign in with Vivaldi, or you can, if you already have a Proton account, which I do, you can sign in with this. And the nice thing about Proton, as it already says here, it's a free VPN. So the browser comes installed with a VPN, which of course is great for safety purposes and making sure that you're not being tracked across the web. So that's already a giant step up from whatever Chrome is doing to us. Now, the second browser that we have is called Mullvad, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. And that's a browser that's owned by a Swedish VPN company. So they started with a VPN, and then at some point they were like, okay, we're also going to make a browser. Couple pros, couple cons of this browser. First of all, pros. It's based on Firefox, so that is great. So that means that Google has no control over this, which is something that we like. And also another pro being that it's one of the most privacy-focused browsers in the list, because it's extra hardened. So what that means is that basically on top of the Firefox, they've made sure that less data is sent to Mozilla than normally would happen. They also have disabled a bunch of JavaScript options that could leak information, and all those kind of options to prevent your information from being tracked by anybody. So in terms of privacy, users have also said that this is one of the best browsers there is, but that also has some definite cons. People have said, and I've read a bunch of forums on this, that on a day-to-day basis, this browser is almost unusable for them, because if you want to log in anywhere or you want to pay anywhere, there's a lot of Cloudflare walls that are being triggered, a lot of reCAPTCHAs that are being triggered, because sites don't know if you're a bot or not, so you have to constantly prove that you're not a bot. So of course that's annoying. And that's one of the major cons of this VPN. Now, if we look at the website itself, or the browser itself, this is the homepage. So as you can see, pretty boring. Not a lot going on, very basic. What's interesting to note is that the search engine by default is DuckDuckGo, which is of course a better option than Google. And you can also pick some other options, but DuckDuckGo is the main option. Now here, what proxy they're being used, so they're basically the VPN. You can see here what location is currently being tracked. I'm in Isla Mujeres in Mexico right now, so that's the IP address, and then you can enable other locations. So you can select location, and then you can just tell like, hey, I want my traffic to be routed through Brazil for some reason, and then it's gonna if possible, connect you to Brazil. Right now, it can't do it, but that doesn't matter. Most of the time, probably you can figure something out. There's a bunch of options in that list. What's also interesting is that it has uBlock Origin installed by default, which is nice because uBlock Origin prevents tracking, fingerprinting, tracking, telemetry, all that kind of stuff, even more. So this is all great for privacy purposes, not that great for day-to-day use. And for the rest, if you want like bookmarks or tabs, you can find them here. So as you can see, not as nice as Vivaldi, very privacy oriented, which is great, not as usable on a day-to-day basis. So it depends on what kind of purposes you want to use this browser for. Third browser on the list is a name you may have heard of when it comes to search engines. It's called Ecosia. And it's my default search engine most of the time. One of the reasons for that is the fact that this company, when they generate profit, they invest that back into environmental projects, which is, of course, something that's very nice. You can also see that here they have 247 million trees planted because of their profit, and they have dedicated almost 100 million euros to environmental projects. So from an environmental standpoint, this is great. I love the initiative. Apparently, they also have a browser. I didn't know that up until a couple hours ago. The browser itself, let's talk about that and its privacy functions. Now, it's based on Chromium. So again, that's already not fantastic because, Google infrastructure means that, Google has complete control over what's happening here most of the time. Now, what you also see, you can sign up, which is already a little iffy if you want to be privacy focused. But once you sign up, you can see that you can continue with Google or with Apple or something like that. So that's not necessarily the most privacy focused option out there. Also doesn't have a VPN installed by default. Also doesn't have uBlock Origin installed by default. And as you can see here, like it really looks a lot like Chrome itself. Also the whole layout on top. This is probably the one that looks the most like Chrome. Now, if you scroll down, this is really, they really have this environmental angle that they're going for, which is great. I 100% support that. But when it comes to privacy focus itself, not that fantastic. What is nice to know, of course, because it's Chromium, is for day-to-day use, it's probably going to be easier than, for example, Mullvad. Because the web is based around Chromium most of the time. So yeah, pros and cons, not necessarily my default choice. I will keep using the search engine, but the browser itself still a little bit too much like Chrome for my taste. Now, one of the other options we definitely need to talk about is Firefox. And before we start off with that, Firefox is not a European alternative. But I need to put it on the list because it's kind of an important web browser for the freedom of the internet. As I said before, like most of the market share in Europe is owned by Google and Apple. Firefox is the only reasonable alternative that isn't big tech. Reason being that Firefox is owned by the Mozilla Foundation, majority owned by the Mozilla Foundation, which is a non-profit organization that's trying to compete with these other two big tech companies. So for the freedom of the internet, Firefox actually is an important thing because it makes sure that the engine that's being used for this, it's called Gecko, that's being maintained. So that's great. It has been my personal default browser for the past year, and it is very usable. Back in the day, Firefox had around a 30% market share. Right now, that's around 7%. But because it had such a big market share, a lot of developers still make websites for Firefox, which means it's very usable on a day-to-day basis. Now, when it comes to a privacy aspect of it, it's not owned by big tech, so that's a plus. But it's not necessarily privacy focused in the sense that it doesn't come pre-installed with a VPN. It also doesn't come pre-installed with uBlock Origin. Of course, you can add those on top of the browser itself as add-ons or plugins or whatever, but it doesn't come pre-installed with it. And it also isn't extra hardened. So that means it's very usable, but it also means there's some data leaks and usage leaks going to be in the browser itself. Now, when we look at the browser itself, this is what it looks like. What I do like is the fact that you can select your default browser. As I said, mine has been Ecosia for quite some time now. You can also go, this isn't browser, but like DuckDuckGo, Bing, Google, and there's some other websites that you can easily default to. Tabs, you can find over here, and you can search for them. You can also add some of those over here. So that's pretty easy. History, the search engine, and you got some actions, which is like things that you want to do in that particular time. So it's a very easy, straightforward browser. It also has, here you can manage your extensions. And this is, your regular settings. So nothing fancy, but it does work very well in my experience. And it's probably a great option if you also add uBlock Origin and a VPN of your choice. And finally, we get to the browser that I may have to make my new browser. And this one is called Librewolf. It's a browser that isn't necessarily owned by any major corporation, which is, of course, a gigantic plus. It's a community project. So it's maintained by individuals like you and me, much like Wikipedia is also built on community participation. What I do like about this browser is that it's still based on the Gecko engine, so it's still based on the same engine that Firefox has and that Firefox develops, but it has a bunch of added privacy on top of it. So this particular browser doesn't track you, and also makes sure that information that is still gathered isn't sent to Mozilla. So it's as privacy focused as it comes. On top of that, it also comes pre-installed with uBlock Origin, which is great. It doesn't have a browser, but of course it does have all the other privacy features already added. It doesn't have a VPN, sorry. But of course you can still add that on top of it. And because it's based on the Firefox engine, it's still going to be very, very usable on a day-to-day basis. Now, here on the left corner, you can pick your default search engine. As you can see, it's very basic. It doesn't say a lot right now. What I do not like is this particular warning about bookmarks. I've noticed that it only goes away if you do add a bookmark. But if you don't want to have a bookmark, you're constantly going to have this on top. I do think it changes when you actually go to a website. No, it's still there. So that's annoying. I do not like that. For the rest, this basically just looks like Firefox. You can add a bunch of plugins, of course, that you want, or add-ons, they're called here. And here you can see your downloads. But from a privacy perspective and from a European perspective, this is great. I think I will actually have to make this my new default browser to make sure I'm not being tracked, and to still support an engine that isn't based on Chromium. And that's the overview of privacy-focused browsers within the European Union. Now, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, because I'm going to be testing a lot more privacy-focused tools that are European alternatives to the American ones. And see you soon.